Now here's a computer in which we've installed the PyAF client, and I'm going to go ahead and run the Pi System Explorer to connect to the PyAF server. I'm going to do this for the first time, and normally when you run this you're going to connect to the default AF server. That's the default you specified when you installed the AF client. I actually removed that default, so right now the Pi System Explorer doesn't know what to connect to. You may see this every once in a while, or you may see this if all your servers have been removed. So let me just show you how this works. I'll go ahead and say yes, I'm going to define a new server. This is how you would connect to a new AF server as well, even if you already got a connection to your default. So I'm going to go in here and I need to specify the name of the AF server. If you take a look at this balloon help here, that's what we're specifying, the AF server. Now the AF server in this case, let me just refresh your memory here. Our AF server is going to be a separate computer from this computer right here. It's a computer that's called NIC GX280. And you can actually put the IP address in here if you prefer, or a fully qualified domain name if you need to. And that's the AF server, the default AF server that I specified when I first installed this. Now there are other AF servers, and I'm going to later demonstrate how to do that, how to connect to a different AF server, and just do a little bit of show you some of the networking that's going on. So let's do that right now. Let's finish up our connection just to show that we can do it, just to show you what this looks like, and then we'll go back and look at details and see exactly what's happening here, what's connecting, what credentials it's using, etc. Now this account that you're being prompted for here is the name of the Windows account that the AF server is going to use in order to connect to the SQL Server database in which your Pi AF server is storing all of its information. Again, we'll go over this more and I'll draw a little diagram, but in my instance what I did is I set up a user. This is a Windows user. I just called him my user, and this Windows user is the user that's granting the AF server privileges to get access to SQL Server to store things. I'll go ahead and connect. And we're prompted to go ahead and save our changes. And there we go. Looks like it's connected properly. And here's the big finish. We're now looking at, if I go over here into the database option, let's look at what we've actually just done here. I've configured a connection to this system right here, this Pi AF server in this case. We call it Pi System. The Pi System actually contains many different servers. One of those is the Pi AF server. So there we go. It looks like it's been done correctly. I can choose different AF databases. There happen to be 2 that I created, plus the configuration one that always shows up within AF. And so this is now the hierarchy that I'm interested in. Let's look at exactly what we're doing here though. So we went through that kind of quickly. Let's draw a picture of exactly what we're connecting to here. So what we saw was a Windows client. So this client computer, this is a little PC, it is running a copy of, let's call this is the Pi System Explorer. So let's just mark that as the Pi System Explorer. That Pi System Explorer application, that is your primary interface to looking at everything inside the AF server from a manager's point of view. You'll notice we also have, there could be other clients in this network running ProcessBook or DataLink, and they'll get access to AF as well. But it's the Pi System Explorer that we're using for management purposes. So that's connected to this network, and there's a server out here that's also on this network. This is your AF server. Let me go ahead and represent this by a big old box. It's labeled simply AF. Now that's the connection we're attempting to make here. That's a server that's out on this network. Now, when I'm initiating this connection, that connection is going to be made using credentials that are completely Windows oriented, or the Windows integrated security. Now by that what I mean is the connection from Pi System Explorer, and specifically the AF SDK, our software development kit that is used for AF or with AF, that AF SDK is using Windows communications entirely to connect from this computer right here over to the AF server. Okay? And that AF server as you saw in my case, I used a Windows user called my user. That AF server is actually configured such that it's that Windows user that has been granted the logon rights for the AF server to actually connect to the SQL Server database. Well, now I've introduced a brand new computer, another computer. Let's talk about that. If you recall, AF is actually storing all of its information in SQL Server. So I've got a separate box here. Could be running on the same computer, but generally it's a separate computer. And on this SQL Server box, everything that's done within AF, all the little configuration changes. Let's say somebody adds a few elements over here. Those elements that are added here, it's through AF, this AF server, that we write those elements to store permanently. And we actually write those in SQL Server. Now, I guess it's oversimplifying it to think of SQL Server as just kind of a storage medium for AF, but that's essentially how we treat it. Unless you're the manager who has to back all this up, you can really treat SQL Server like it's a black box. Now, one thing, though, you do have to be able to do in this situation is this computer right here, it needs some ability to connect to this computer over here. So, how is that connection going to be made? Well, if I can let me bring up my servers here, I'll show you how that connection was made in this instance. I've switched over now to my AF server, and if we take a look at the services applet in the AF server, we take a look at the properties of this PyAF server service, what you'll see is that I have specified that we're going to use this logon, or we're going to log on as the user called my user. That's a local Windows user. That I could use a domain user or a local Windows user as long as that local Windows user has the same username and password on the other computers involved, in this case on the SQL Server machine. So this is going to be using the privileges of my user. Well, what good does that do, you might ask? Well, let's go take a look at what privileges that user has over on, this is going to be the SQL Server box. So let's take a look at the computer that's running SQL Server, the SQL Server that's storing all these things for AF. If I go out here to my administrative tools, this is my SQL Server box, and we open up computer management, we'll be able to look at what the users and the groups look like on this machine. And if I go into the groups, let me minimize this. If I go into the groups, we can see that there is a Windows group, a security group called AF servers. And here's our big finish. That local user, now it's a local user on this computer, this SQL Server box. That user is a member of the AF servers. And as you can see, the AF servers group is a group that's specifically set up to allow access to the AF SQL database. And that was something that we set up during the installation of the AF SQL database for PyAF. So do you see how that all fits together? If I go out again to my PySystem Explorer, we take a look at that AF server. Here's the AF server that we defined. If we take a look at its properties, we have configured this such that it's using the account called myuser. Okay, myuser is the account that grants the AF server access to the SQL Server database. Now that maps directly over to, let me close out of this and look at the AF server. AF server has been configured to log on to SQL. It's basically connecting to other machines and being granted the privileges of my user. And the grand finale to this is back here on this SQL Server box. Again, we have AF servers, which grants my user the privileges that are required to write to SQL Server.